What would government regulation and breaking up the big tech monopolies actually look like? Hey everyone, this is Kevin the Apptrepreneur, and if you've been watching my channel, you know that I've been talking a little bit more than just Uber, Lyft, and the gig economy recently. I am very concerned about the tech monopolies that Google, Microsoft, Facebook, Disney, Uber, Lyft, and all of the Twitter, all these companies. I am concerned about what these companies are doing. Apple, can never forget Apple, and how they are controlling our lives, and they are taking way too big a part in them, and they are in some ways even controlling our speech. We know the government as basically, they're going to regulate them. They're probably going to force them to break up at some point. You can't keep this going on forever. And by the way, I think it would be good for the economy. You break up the companies, you have multiple new businesses that are now competing with one another. I think that's good for the economy. But what would it actually look like? And what would get sold off? Well, here's an article from Forbes from Greg Petro called Judgment Day Looms for Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Google. And this is a short opinion piece, and then I want to give my opinion on it. But he says, June 2019 appears to have been the tipping point when the chorus of complaints that too few companies control too much of all human endeavor began to slide toward a broader call for some form of antitrust action. It's an argument that's been made for several years now. Four huge companies, Apple, Google, Facebook, and Amazon, shouldn't be able to run the world. They do, but I see cracks in the ramparts. Big tech seems to have become too big to fail. Where would we be without any one of them? But as we learned in the Great Recession of 2018, there is no such thing as too big to fail. Restlessness about tech monopolies is emerging as a major issue in the early jousting for the Democratic presidential nomination. Wall Street, as usual, saw it coming. The shares of all four companies, stellar outperformers for years, have seen high validity in the past few quarters. Among the many articles that have appeared recently, the Wall Street Journal called the gathering storm a backlash against Silicon Valley. It's more complicated, potentially monumental, and beginning to look inevitable that market forces, as opposed to government intervention, will play the deciding role. Too big to fail, by definition, means too big to adapt. The seeds of today's techno jungle were sown 35 years ago in a similar antitrust environment that resulted in the forced breakup of Ma Bell, AT&T, into several independent companies. At the time, interest rates had spiked to nearly 20%, energy was expensive, and industrial companies dominated the economy. Today, cheap money has never been as abundant. We're essentially energy self-efficient, and technology companies dominate the world. But what looks to some like a solid phalanx of threats to privacy and innovation may turn out to be a techno-apocalypse in the making. As I recently, somebody RSVP'd to my wedding. That's a little side note. A few people have. Neat. As I recently wrote here, Apple has caught a bad case of complacency, recently raising prices on iconic devices without offering much in the way of innovation. Its core businesses are mature, and Apple is no longer the leading edge company it once was. A recent symptom, the company threw in the towel on its music streaming services, iTunes. Meanwhile, Wall Street has been voting with its shares. A number of top institutions, the so-called smart company money, began trimming their positions in the first quarter of this year. Names like Susquehanna Financial Group, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, and BlackRock. Apple is reaping what it has sown over the years. Vendor lock-in prices, designing laptops that users cannot repair themselves, designing its phone so Google Voice would not work, which, it's funny that they say that, because one of the reasons Microsoft was forced to break up was because they made it so that Netscape, which was an internet browser at the time, A, couldn't run on Windows, and B, they gave away Internet Explorer for free. You actually had to pay for browsers at one point, and not anymore since Microsoft. You may say that's a good thing, but it puts a couple companies out of business, and that's why they got broken up. Anyway, allegations of anti-competitive collusion with record labels, attempting to force journalists to disclose the sources of leaks about new products. This is not the behavior of a tech leader, but the thrashing of a dinosaur trying to survive the Big Bang. Google's problems are even more complex. Complaints of contrived and artificial distinctions are to avoid paying corporate taxes, manipulating search results to exclude competing ad platforms, copyright infringement in the Google Books and library projects, and most recently, a panoply of complaints about YouTube ranging from censorship to enabling hate speech and softcore, CP. YouTube alone is a ball of string, and it may well be that at some point Google will have no choice but to spin it off just to avoid an avalanche of lawsuits and settlements, which I agree with. Meanwhile, a recent report in the Wall Street Journal suggested that the Justice Department is preparing for an antitrust investigation and that people familiar with Google's restructuring said the operation had become outmoded after years of rapid global growth. Now, here was a paragraph that made me want to make this video, particularly. Google shareholders, which I am one, I should say, should have a say in all of this, but they don't. The structure of Google shares are such that, by most estimates, founders Larry Page and Sergey Brin control 56% of the stockholder voting power through supervoting stock. I think supervoting stock is something that's going to have to go away as these companies are looked at more deeply, because a supervote is basically a stock that has a greater vote value. Like, say you have like a share and that share equals 1 vote. Well, the super share has 10 votes. So if someone has 200 shares of Google stock, but someone has 50 shares, well, it's not going to look so good that, well, yeah, those people with 200 shares, they don't have a chance, basically. So Facebook has a huge privacy problem that has blown up recently with revelations that the company has been violating a 2012 consent decree with the Federal Trade Commission. There may be a huge multi-billion-dollar settlement in the future, but according to recent news reports, some FTC officials are contemplating naming founder and CEO Mark Zuckerberg as a respondent in any litigation. The problem is so big, so complex, and so impossible to put back in the box that it's hard to see how the company can weather the current storm without some sort of fundamental reorganization or breakup. And we're getting to the end of this, and then I'm going to share my thoughts. Finally, there is Amazon, my favorite. A company most of us use as the first source for online shopping, which has been cited for anti-competitive and monopolistic behavior. And for those reasons, I don't shop at Amazon. Have not shopped at Amazon for years. The company has been in an on-again, off-again scrap with Google over its competitive products. Google Home, Chromecast, etc. By the way, also some Apple products, because if Apple has a product like the Apple TV and Amazon has the Fire TV, guess what gets priority when someone looks for streaming boxes? It's going to be the Apple TV, and they're going to hide the Apple TV, the Roku box, everything. It has been hit with withering criticism for working conditions in its warehouses, which we have covered that a lot here. Speculation that it is selling its facial recognition technology to U.S. immigration authorities, and the flawed way in which it handled its search for a second headquarters. Also, that whole, recording conversations on the Alexa devices and storing them, even if you want them deleted. Yeah, that's not creepy at all. Amazon's business continues to thrive, but that's because it's Amazon's web service subsidiary is hugely profitable. And yeah, that's the thing. Amazon for 20 years was not profitable until the web services came along. Last year, AWS generated about half of Amazon's operating income on about 1/5 the revenue taken by the company's e-commerce unit. Further, Amazon may look like an e-tailer, but it's really a logistics and delivery service. The controversy surrounding all four companies will soon enough demand resolution, and if any of them act as the public companies they are, rather than the personality-driven empires they behave like, the right thing to do for shareholders, and ultimately customers as well, will be to spin off the cloud services, the Instagrams, the YouTubes, and maybe even the iPhone into new companies that are focused and energized for innovation instead of domination. Either way, fasten your seatbelts. It feels like we're in for a bumpy, and it doesn't say anything else, but I'm assuming he meant ride at that point. So, anyway, yeah, that is an interesting little look. I believe these companies will be broken up. Now, what would the breakups look like? Well, first of all, let's talk about Facebook. I believe that, yes, he is correct. Instagram, WhatsApp, those will probably be forced to be spun off from Facebook. If you look at Twitter, Jack Dorsey most likely will either have to run Twitter or Square Cash. He likely won't be able to run both. Amazon might have to spin off a couple companies. They would have to spin off their cloud computing services, and I believe they would have to spin off some of their products lines. Like we're talking about like the Kindle division, they probably can't be making merchandise and selling it at the same time. By the way, that's probably also going to hit like Target, Walmart, Staples, other companies that make their own merchandise as well. If Amazon can't do it, they can't do it. The iPhone, I don't know if like spinning, maybe they don't have to spin off the iPhone. I think Apple might be forced to spin off the iTunes and the iPod. Like you can make the devices that play the content, but you can't make the content itself. You can't distribute the content as well. Like you're going to have to allow other third-party vendors on your devices. For that reason, they might even have to make it so that, hey, if you want to keep your computer division intact, you're going to have to give people a way to open the devices and fix it themselves. There's a lot to happen in this case. It's just like, and then you have Disney. I'm honestly surprised Disney was not forced to sell more of the company when they merged with Fox. If I were the regulation, I would have said, okay, if you want to buy Fox, you can have the content. However, the studios all have to be spun off. You can't keep Fox Searchlight. You can't keep Fox 2000. You can't keep Blue Sky Studios. Also, distribution. You can't own Hulu. The whole point of Hulu is that no one person owns Hulu. You got to spin that off. So it's going to be interesting to see what the government actually does, and it is going to be a main focus of this channel when it starts to finally take shape, when it starts to take form. And by the way, I would throw Uber and Lyft in this too. Uber and Lyft are essentially a duopoly. So I think Uber and Lyft might actually be the easiest to solve. It might be the thing where it's like, hey, okay, you can be the platform for the drivers, but you can't say what the rates are going to be. Wouldn't that be nice? That you can actually make your own rates again. I think breaking up the tech companies is important. I think it needs to happen, and it needs to happen yesterday, not tomorrow. However, we're going to have to wait till tomorrow, and we're going to have to wait till many days afterwards. In the meantime, what do you folks think? Are you in favor of the tech companies being broken up? Do you not care? Do you think they shouldn't be broken up? I know there's a lot of Apple fans who particularly do not want the government breaking up the App Store and stuff because, they like the way the App Store is run, even though it's run in a very monopolistic fashion. But I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. Like, favorite, share, subscribe. And if you really enjoy my content, consider becoming a Patreon member. It's totally optional, of course, but even as little as $1 a month goes a long way to helping the channel run smoothly, and you get access to my Patreon's exclusive blog. Also, if gas prices are getting you just a little down, check out the Get Upside app below. It's totally free, but you get cash back on every gas purchase. If you want to see more content from me that's a little different from what we normally talk about here, check me out at Kevin T. Rodriguez and the Apptrepreneur Vlogs YouTube channels. Links below. And finally, if you want to talk to me or other fellow tech fans, rideshare drivers, food delivery people, whatever, check us out at the Apptrepreneur Hangouts on Facebook. And as always, flame responsibly. Have a good one.